Hey, what's up guys? Ethan Hamrick here with Wish Upon a Fish. Welcome back to the channel. If you remember from our last video, we talked about some tips to keep in mind when you're dock fishing for bass. And in today's video, we're going to talk about some of the best baits to throw when you're dock fishing for bass, and talk about my favorite rod and reel combos to use for dock fishing. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so when I go about dock fishing, I like to stick with three main baits. And this is just because each of these baits is relatively easy to skip, and they include a swim jig, a chatterbait, and a Senko. And now you can fish around docks and to the sides of docks with a lot of other baits, crankbaits, spinnerbaits, topwater baits. But it's a swim jig or some type of jig, a chatterbait, and a Senko are all easy to skip underneath boat docks. And skipping is a crucial part of this technique because it allows you to get your bait further back underneath those docks to where a lot of anglers haven't gotten their bait, and you're therefore presenting your bait to more fish that haven't seen as many lures, and in turn you'll catch more fish that way. And that's why I prefer these three baits, because they make it easy to skip and get your bait far back underneath those docks. So let's start with a swim jig. You can use a lot of different jigs for skipping docks. I just prefer a swim jig. The swim jigs I like to use are Strike King Tour Grade swim jigs. That's what this is here and this is here. Both these are Strike King Tour Grade swim jigs. And as you can see, there's trailers on the back of both of these baits here. And the trailers I like to use are Strike King Rage Tail Craws. These trailers have excellent action. They provide an excellent bulk and erratic movement and action in the water, and are just excellent little trailers. My personal favorite jig trailer to throw on any jig is that Strike King Rage Tail Crawl. I always match the color of the jig to the color of the trailer, and I'll just skip this jig back far underneath docks, let it fall to the bottom, swim it out, hop it off the bottom, work it fast, work it slow. I can just do a ton with this swim jig. A lot of times fish will hit it on the fall. Other times they'll hit it when you're reeling it back to you. So it's just an excellent bait to throw really anywhere in grass or other vegetation, but I love skipping under docks because it skips so easy and allows you to get that bait far back underneath those docks. When it comes to the size of the jig head, I like to stick with anywhere from a 1/4 to a 1/2 ounce. If I'm fishing shallower water, I like to stick with a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce jig head. But if I'm fishing on water it's a little bit deeper, say 6 or 8 feet or more, I'll often go to a 1/2 ounce jig head so I can get that bait down there a little bit quicker. And now as far as my color patterns go for swim jigs and for most artificial baits, I like to keep it pretty simple. Anytime I'm fishing in dark or dingy water, I like to stick with a dark color, like a black and blue or some shade of black and blue or June bug. I like it in that dark water because it gives off a bigger silhouette and gives those fish a better chance to pick up on that bait and find it easier because it gives off more of a silhouette in the water. Now in clean water, I like using a green pumpkin or some shade of green in that clean water because it looks more natural to those fish and blends in better with their habitat. Now the next bait that I like to skip underneath docks is a chatterbait. Now a chatterbait is just an awesome bait for a lot of different things. Traditionally used for like fishing over the tops of submerged grass or other vegetation, but I like to use it for skipping docks. I actually broke my PB twice in the same morning throwing a white chatterbait, skipping a white chatterbait underneath boat docks back last November, and I caught like a 9 and a 9.4 in the same morning, like 30 minutes apart, skipping a white chatterbait underneath boat docks. So I know it catches big fish. It gets those bigger fish to trigger and to bite, but it also catches a lot of fish. It catches good numbers as well. So when it comes to the best chatterbait, I believe it's the Z-Man chatterbait. This is the Z-Man original chatterbait. They also make a couple other models, Z-Man does, that are a little more expensive than this original chatterbait, but I believe it works just as good as some other more expensive lure. This is only like a $5 lure, but it's a super great bait. The hook is super sharp. It's got the same great swimming action and movement as those more expensive baits, in my opinion. So what makes it a chatterbait is this blade on top of the head here. Because when reeled through the water, this blade on the top of this bait here creates a lot of chatter and vibrates back and forth. And this is what those fish are drawn to when this lure is brought through the water. Now as far as trailers go for my chatterbaits, my preferred trailer is a Strike King Rage Swimmer. These little swim baits are excellent lures. Here's one, just a plain swim bait with no chatterbait. But the Strike King Rage Swimmer is just an epic little soft plastic swim bait. My favorite one on the market. But it makes an excellent trailer for these chatterbaits. And it's got great boot tail action and erratic movement through the water. It looks like a fleeing bait fish. I typically go with like a 2.5 to 3.5 inch twin bait for my trailer, for my chatterbait trailer. When I'm working a chatterbait, usually I'll skip it as far as I can underneath that dock, let it fall to the bottom, and then just turn that reel and activate that blade on there so I get that good chatter and vibration that this bait provides. Occasionally I will let it fall back to the bottom and fish will hit it on the fall, but most of the bites I get on a chatterbait come when I'm reeling it back to me. And I can vary my retrieve based on how cold the water is or how the fish are responding on that certain day. Usually the colder the water, the slower my retrieve. The sizes that I use are the same with a swim jig. I like a 1/4 to a 3/8 ounce chatterbait. If I'm fishing shallow water, like 2 to 6 feet. If I'm fishing any deeper than 6 or 8 feet, I like a 1/2 ounce chatterbait because it allows me to get that bait down there faster. And as far as color patterns go, I like to stick with the same color patterns, the black and blue and dingy water, and a green or some sort of green pumpkin in clean water. Occasionally I will throw a white chatterbait, especially if I can see on the surface or on my graph that there's a lot of bait fish or shad in the water or schooling around the area I'm fishing. I will throw a white chatterbait because it imitates those shad better than a green pumpkin or black and blue. Now, as far as the rod and reel combo that I use for a swim jig and a chatterbait, and usually I'll prefer a 7-foot medium heavy bait casting rod paired to a reel with a pretty fast action, 7 to 1 to 1, even 8 1 to 1 sometimes, so I can get those fish out of there quick, away from that structure. I'll spool my reel with 20 to 30 pound braided line, and then I'll tie somewhere between a 12 and 20 pound fluorocarbon leader to my main line braid. I feel like that leader disguises that braid a lot better and I get more bites using a leader. I usually make that leader about 6 or 8 feet long. You can make it longer or shorter, but I feel like 6 or 8 feet is a pretty good length. It allows me to fish all day without having to retie a new leader. But now when you're just learning to skip a bait caster or even just throw a bait caster, it's important to take note of your tension knob here on the side of your reel. And what this tension knob does, it controls how fast the line comes off your reel. It's important to adjust this tension knob when you're skipping boat docks because you get backlashes quite a bit skipping boat docks. And to avoid that, you need to come set your tension knob on a higher gear. Now, if you're a beginner skipping a bait caster, I would recommend putting your tension knob all the way on a 10 just to avoid those backlashes. You won't get nearly as many on that higher gear. As you improve your skills and get better skipping a bait caster, you can obviously dial that tension knob down to whatever level you're comfortable with. I like to keep mine on a 6 or 7. That's a good place for me to leave it on, and it allows me to skip those baits far back underneath those docks and present it to the fish well. But just keep that tension knob in mind when you're skipping boat docks for bass. And if you're new at skipping or just learning how, a good way to practice without even having to be on the water is just find you a flat surface like a concrete slab, tie on a bait like a swim jig or chatterbait, and just go practice skipping it off that surface towards the target. It's a good way for you to practice without even having to be on the water. Now, as I mentioned, swim jigs and chatterbaits are usually my go-to lures for skipping docks. However, a lot of times fish just won't react to a swim jig or a chatterbait. They just won't eat one. And if that's the case, I go a little more finesse. I go to my spinning gear and I throw a Senko. A Senko is another absolutely fantastic bait to skip underneath boat docks. It's very easy to skip. If you're just learning how to skip, it's a great lure to learn with. I like to rig my Senkos for one of 2 ways for fishing boat docks, either on a Wacky Rig or a Nico Rig. And we'll start with a Wacky Rig here. Just take your standard Senko, and I take what they call, what is known as an O-ring. Just get you a standard O-ring and slide it over your Senko, about down to the middle of the bait. Then I just take my hook. This is a 1/0 VMC Wacky hook. Take that hook and slide it through that O-ring, and there I have it. That's my little Wacky Rig Senko. Just an awesome way to rig a Senko. Super deadly action as it just flutters to the bottom. Year round you can catch fish on this bait and just about every place in the country. When you're working that Wacky Rig Senko, you just want to skip it up under that dock as far as you can. Let it fall to the bottom or almost to the bottom, and then just hop it back to you and work it back to you, and just give that bait good flutter and action as it comes through the water. And those fish just can't stand that action for whatever reason. It may look strange to us, or it may look too simple to us, but those fish absolutely love it. Now, Wacky rigging is the first way I like to rig a Senko for skipping boat docks. The second way is Nico rigging. Now, Nico rigging a Senko is very similar to Wacky rigging. There's just one added step in the process. But what I do is I take my same Senko and the same O-ring, and what I do is I just slide it down the bait again. Just nice, slide it down the bait. But instead of going only halfway, I'm going to go about 2/3 of the way down this bait. So about somewhere right in there. And then before I slide my hook through that O-ring, I'm going to take what they call a Nico weight, or a nail weight. This is a 1/32 ounce VMC nail weight. As you can see, it's a little tiny tiny little weight. But this weight's designed to stick right in the head of this worm. I'm gonna take my hook. Again, this is a 1/0 VMC Wacky hook. I can slide it through that O-ring. And I've got my Nico Rig. Now, what this bait's gonna do differently from a Wacky Rig is fall straight to the bottom. As opposed to falling like this, it's gonna fall like this. And what this worm here does, it appears to bass as some sort of intruder trying to invade their territory or feed on their eggs, and bass just absolutely hate it, so they will often attack this if it gets anywhere near their territory. This bait skips just as easy as a weightless Senko, but like I said, it falls straight to the bottom, and you can just hop it off the bottom, pop it off the bottom. Just give this bait that look that it's trying to be an intruder or eat those bass eggs as you hop it off the bottom. Just an excellent bait overall for skipping those boat docks. I've caught multiple fish over 8 pounds using Senkos skipped under boat docks. So they definitely catch those big fish, especially during the springtime when those fish are up shallow, bedding underneath those boat docks. So it's a great technique for the springtime because of that. So not only will it catch numbers, it'll catch big ones as well. Now, as far as colors go for the Senkos I use, I stick to the same color patterns as I do with my other baits. In dark, dingy water, I like a black and blue. And in clean, clear water, I like some sort of watermelon green or watermelon red or green pumpkin. Now, when it comes to the best brands of Senkos, I'm not too brand specific about the Senkos that I use. I think all Senkos work. It's just a matter of your preference. Just pick one you like and build confidence with it, and you'll be able to catch fish on it. But just to throw a few brands out there, give you some suggestions if you don't already have your favorite Senko. 3 of the brands that I like the best are obviously the Gary Yamamoto Senko. Can't go wrong there. They're a little bit on the expensive side, but they're awesome lures and work great. Then there's the Yum Dinger, which is much less expensive, but they still have great action and will catch a lot of fish as well. And then a new Senko I started using the last few months is the X-Zone Lures True Center Stick. It also has great action and flare in the water. It's somewhere in the middle from a price range standpoint of these other 2. But all 3 of these brands make excellent Senkos, as do tons of other brands. Like I said, it's just a matter of your preference. When I'm skipping a Senko underneath boat docks, I usually always go with spinning gear. It's just way easier to skip that light bait on spinning gear. And I'll usually go with a 7-foot medium action spinning rod paired to a reel with a 6:4 to 1 gear ratio. Spool that reel with 10 to 20 pound braid. Then I'll tie the fluorocarbon leader to my mainline braid, like a 6 or 8 foot fluorocarbon leader that will last me all day long if I won't have to retie throughout a day's worth of fishing. And that leader just disguises that braid a little better, and I get more bites that way. If I'm fishing cleaner water, I'll go down to a 12-pound leader. If I'm fishing darker water, I'll go up to a 17 or even a 20-pound leader if I'm fishing real dirty water. But that is my spinning gear setup. What I always use when I'm skipping Senkos underneath boat docks. Alright guys, so that wraps up our video on the top baits for dock fishing. Be sure to give some of these baits a try the next time you're fishing around boat docks. I will link all the gear that I talked about in the video description. So if you're unsure of what lures to buy, just go click down here in the video description and you'll see everything that I talked about today. Please be sure to like the video, click up here in this corner to subscribe to our channel, click down here to see our last video, and there'll be a lot more exciting and helpful fishing videos headed your way. We'll talk to you soon.